I don't think Mr. Swarup needs any introduction whatsoever. He's a millionaire, but certainly not a slumdog. Kidding. The first question, obviously, people would ask is about Slumdog Millionaire. I shall defer that. I shall get back to your experience as a diplomat, as a bureaucrat. There have been other writers as well from the bureaucracy. I didn't even know Charles Dickens was a civil servant or Keats was a civil servant. Or, of course, you have Madhavan, you have Upamanyu. What I want to ask you is that your experience in the civil services, I don't see much of an overlap in your writing.
Yep. Well, I was a diplomat for 35 years, but there's nothing diplomatic about my novels. So, because the reason is, when you are writing a novel, you have to be true to the characters you are creating. I mean, people say that, why didn't you write about India of the call centers, rising India, shining India, and things like that. And I said, because I was writing a novel, I was not writing a tourist brochure about India. But having said that, I have tried to explore different strata of society in each of my 4 novels. So the first novel, Slumdog Millionaire, as you know, which became Slumdog Millionaire, was about the underclass. 6 Suspects was a look at India through 6 different eyes. You had a Bollywood actress, you had a politician, a very powerful politician, you had a just recently retired bureaucrat, you had a mobile phone thief, you had a tribal from the Andaman Islands, and you had Larry Page coming all the way from America. So the idea was to look at India through a polyphonic narrative where 6 different people, tell you their own versions of our country. In the 3rd novel, The Accidental Apprentice, I explored I would say, the world of the middle class. Sapna Sinha, 23-year-old sales girl, gets the offer to become the CEO of a $10 billion company and how that changes her life. And again, for this new novel, The Girl with the 7 Lives, I have returned back, in a sense, to the world of Q&A, a look at the underclass, but then through the lens of a female protagonist rather than a male one.
In Q&A, the first book, which became the Slumdog Millionaire, I find some curious things. Like, for example, the protagonist, he's Ram Mohammed Thomas, right?
Ram Mohammed Thomas, not Jamal Malik.
All right. So is there a, and also the other ones also I see, does it represent in India? Is it a greater allegory,
Yes.
metaphor?
No, absolutely. Because you see, when I was writing this novel, I wanted my protagonist to represent the microcosm of India. And in India, unfortunately, your name becomes a very particular thing. The moment you say your name is Avdesh Prasad Mishra, you tell so many things about yourself. You say you are a Hindu, you are a Brahmin, you are from North India, probably UP or MP or Bihar, and probably you are a vegetarian. So there are 4 things I know about you just by knowing your name. And I wanted my hero to transcend these barriers. So that's why I gave him this name, Ram Mohammed Thomas. Now with that name, you really don't know, is he from the north, is he from the south, is he Hindu, is he Muslim? He is India.
Right. Now, one overrunning theme I feel in that book particularly, is about poverty. Poverty, I don't mean just financial. I mean spiritual, I mean emotional, personal. Rahim is the protagonist. He's denied of his right, of the money, of his prize, or they try to deny it. I forget the name of the boy who is a prostitute's son, and he keeps saying "mummy." He's deprived of his mother.
You're talking about the film or the book?
The Q&A.
Okay.
The book. Then you have the woman, Meena
Yes,
Kumari.
the boy was Shankar.
Shankar, yeah.
Yes.
And then you have Meena Kumari, who's not...
What was her name?
Yeah, the one who was made on loosely.
The actress, yes.
Yeah, and she...
Yesteryear's actress.
Yeah, and she wants to be beautiful.
Tragedy queen.
Correct. And she wants to be beautiful. She wants to be beautiful, but tragically she's found when her body is ugliest, right? So there is a theme of tragic deprivation, and the characters or human beings desire to overcome it. It's a very unusual way of looking at somebody who has traveled in circles which are far away from this.
Yes. But you see, those are the kinds of lives that interest me more. at my Delhi launch with Veer Sangvi, the Norwegian ambassador was there. And I couldn't resist asking her, I said, Ambassador, in your country, you don't have poverty, you don't have slums. How many stories can you have of love, marriage, and divorce? But in India, because we are a nation of 1.4 billion people, and because we have people living at what I call the ground zero of human survival, their stories are much more compelling. I mean, should I marry Diana or should I marry Rita is one story, and will I live tomorrow or will I die tomorrow is another story. The stakes are that much higher. And that's why, as a novelist, those kinds of stories interest me much more. Exploring the world of the underclass, their hopes and aspirations. And in a way, trying to give voice to the voiceless.
See, the life of a diplomat, just because you were in the IFS doesn't mean that you do not kind of know what is happening in the other areas of the bureaucracy. I mean, you have batchmates, etc. A running theme I find in all your three books, I haven't read the other two, except that The Six Suspects, I am familiar with the situation because I know some of the characters involved in it in real life, knew, or whatever. There's an element of corruption, which is in the in the police or in politics, which is a running theme. If you look at all the three books in terms of plots, is it? It's beyond a comment of what is actually happening in the situation. Is it also any directional instances you have faced?
No, as I said, having been in the Indian Foreign Service, I was largely away from the corruption and the sordidness. So it was not that. But again, for me, I have to be true to the characters I am creating. And if those characters, are navigating a life which is a difficult life, then they have to pass through, some of the checkposts, as we might call them. There's bribery, there is corruption, there is crime. But more than that, I think the overarching theme, I would say, is not crime and corruption. It's really the hierarchy and the exploitation of the weak by the strong. I think that would be, in my sense.
And that is, I know, but the exploitation of the weak by the strong, especially in India or the third world countries, is strongly aligned with officialdom. Especially with the police and this thing. Anyway, when you write a book, sometimes people see it in the mind. Sometimes when you're really into the narrative, you visually imagine practically without helping it. How much, when you're translating your writing into cinematography, obviously it came out very well because they're very graphic, the description. So did you actually start seeing them in your mind as?
No, BBC asked me this question after my first book came out, that when you were writing it, could you visualize it as a film? And I answered that I couldn't even visualize it as a book because, for a first-time author, what are the chances of even getting published? But look, I do write in a very visual kind of way because the way I write is I first imagine that scene in my head and then I sort of transcribe it onto my computer. So that is why when somebody is translating that book for an adaptation into the screen, probably it's an easier adaptation. But having said that, let me make it very clear, when I'm writing the novel, I'm writing the novel. I do not have one eye that, tomorrow this might be a film or a web series, so let's put in those kinds of elements which will translate better into a film. Because then I think it will neither be a good film, neither will it be a good book.
No, you partly misunderstood my question. I didn't ask whether you're writing it to make a film. I was asking you whether you see it in the mind as a reel.
So that's what I said.
That's continuous.
That's what I said, that I first visualize the scene in my head, and then I write it. So that is why when you are trying to yourself visualize it for the screen, you can create that mental image in your head because that same mental image was in my head when I wrote it.
Yeah, because writing is a very visual. So do you draw? Do you draw pictures?
No, I don't draw pictures at all. In fact, I have writer's cramp, so I cannot hold a pen for very long.
Okay, let me ask you about the process. Again, getting back to it, The Six Suspects it's loosely based on Jessica Lal's murder. By sheer coincidence, I was there, when it was, but unfortunately, I was on the terrace, so I didn't see.
You were at that pub?
Yeah, I was at the party.
Oh my God.
And I was upstairs. There was a terrace upstairs, so I wasn't there exactly there.
You heard the gunshot?
I don't know. I don't think I heard the gunshot, but there was a lot of noise happening there. But I could see how it was contained so effectively and so quickly because there were people who knew people. They were connected, right? So that really represented Delhi. It has come from there, you have taken it on further. It had taken it on further. And what was your purpose in taking it further? Because it was a, an elastification of the corruption, the story of corruption,
So
the cover
that's a
up.
good question. But you see, many people have confused that novel as being about the Jessica Lal case. No. This novel is really about, looking at India. It's a polyphonic narrative in which one of the central characters is a chap called Vicky Rai. Now, Vicky Rai is the playboy son of the Home Minister of Uttar Pradesh. When he was 17 years old, his father gifted him a BMW. He took it out for a spin, and while coming back, mowed down 6 homeless people who were sleeping on the pavement. This has nothing to do with the Jessica Lal case, as you can see. When he was 20 years old, he goes to a wildlife sanctuary in Rajasthan and shoots dead 2 black bucks. Again, nothing to do with Jessica Lal case. And when he was 25 years old, he decides to have his birthday party at this pub. At 2 a.m., staggers to the bar, asks for a drink. The bartender, who's this girl, says, sorry, the bar is now closed. He takes out his gun and he shoots her dead. All this happens in the first 10 pages of the novel. So the rest of the novel is really about, so in all these 3 cases, he has been exonerated because his father is a powerful politician and nothing can happen to him. So when he is finally arrested for the murder of this bartender, Ruby Gill in my book, not Jessica Lal, when he's exonerated, he holds a big party at his farmhouse with 300, 400 guests, and somebody shoots him dead at that party when the lights have gone out. So the rest of the novel is really about these 6 suspects, because these 6 people are arrested at the party with guns in their possession. And the police are now going to match the ballistics report with the guns and find out which one of them is the murderer. So the Jessica Lal, the Black Bucks case, the BMW case, all form just the backdrop of the character of Vicky Rai, which is over in the first 10 pages of the novel. The rest of the novel is really the backstories of these 6 people. Why were they at the farmhouse? Why did they have a gun with them? Which one of them is the murderer?
No, right. That was a takeoff point, because I mean, it's like
Yes, it was just a takeoff point.
Yeah, see, it's like a Jungian kind of a collective subconscious thing, because things which have happened in your mind suddenly start kind of falling like a jigsaw puzzle, and then
Because
kind of
in a way, I try to capture the zeitgeist of the times.
Exactly.
And
It is
the
zeitgeist,
Jessica Lal
that's what it's
case was very much part of the Indian zeitgeist at that time when I wrote it in 2008.
So let me go back to a basic question. What is the process of your writing? What is the process of his writing? Can you lead us
Yes.
through that?
So the process of my writing is an idea gets into my head. How that idea gets into the head is always a very mysterious process. You as a writer yourself would probably not be able to say when exactly, at what particular moment the idea came into your head. Or you might, I don't know, I can't. So once an idea has entered my head, then I start developing that idea in my head itself. So it remains in my head for about maybe 5 to 6 months, where I'm working out the character arcs. That, okay, the basic idea is that there's this girl, 23-year-old, who goes to the Hanuman temple in Connaught Place, and there she meets an elderly billionaire who says, I want to make you the CEO of my $10 billion company. Now what happens after that? Where will she go? What is the game afoot here? Once I have done that, then I start my research. Because for me, the most important thing is the research. Yeah. My characters are fictional, but the background against which they are operating is a very real. I mean, they are Indian cities or Indian, known places, etc. So I have to ensure that the backdrop is authentic. And that's when I do the research. And once the research is over, once the character arcs are fully fleshed out, that is when I sit down to write. And that is why what often gets published is just my first draft, because by then the thing is fully formed in my head.
As a writer, in the process, sometimes what happens to me when I'm writing, and I'm quite chugging along quite happily according to the plot I have in my head, and suddenly somebody else pops up.
Yes.
Absolutely no clue was there, and suddenly the entire kind of story takes on. Did it happen to you in any of your books?
No, it does not happen with my books, for the simple reason that all my books are very well structured, because there is a payoff at the end. There is a surprise at the end, a surprise revelation, or in the case of 6 suspects, who the murderer is. So then I have to embed that surprise very carefully, so that the reader reads it but is not able to guess it. And that's why the reader gets a surprise at the end of the day. And for you to do that, you have to embed it very, very carefully. You cannot do a stream of consciousness writing, then let's go with the flow, and then suddenly you create something out of thin air. The reader will not be surprised. So because, as I said, my aim is to surprise the reader at the end, I have to plot it very carefully and structure it very
Oh, that's a very
meticulously.
structured mind.
Yes.
Because sometimes characters evolve as
But
they
yes,
go along.
I mean, look, 100% of the plot is never in any writer's head. It cannot be. You have maybe 50, 60% of the plot. The rest 40% develops in the process of writing. And then suddenly, side characters develop. The trajectory of some characters change. I think that is what is very important. Who was mentioning, I think, Megha was mentioning that, the characters become people and they start talking to you. And that's really what happens with me, that writer's block for me is not that I don't have any ideas at all, but that my characters are refusing to do my bidding. They are saying, sorry, I cannot do this because now I've become a real person, and this is not the way I would be behaving. And that's when you have to take a step back and say, maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere, and you have to rectify that.
That's a very interesting definition of writer's block. I want to ask you something which could be termed as a psychological question. You have had an illustrious career, diplomat, representing the country in various other countries, forums, etc., and ultimately retiring as the Foreign Secretary of India.
Not Foreign Secretary, Secretary West.
Okay. It said Foreign
I don't know, for some reason, this is on Google, and I've had a huge problem because I attended a function in which it was emblazoned former Foreign Secretary of India, and I had to sit in such a way that is not visible.
Let's put it that OLF has promoted you for the time being from my side. Okay, in retrospect. For someone who has rarely moved in the slumdog millionaire circles, or, the four suspects, or even the morbid corporate, planning and this thing of the
Accidental
accidental apprentice. How is it that you're drawn to so much of the dark side, so much of the dirty side? And for someone who has presumably had no exposure to that.
No, because as I said, those are the kinds of stories that interest me more. The dark side.
That's why I'm asking you why.
I don't know, because for a novelist, again, I think the kind of tension that you can create in those kinds of worlds is obviously much more than you would have in a totally lit up world. A dark world obviously is much more mysterious.
Apologies, I'm going to push you more on this. There's a school of thought, especially some of those Nietzschean schools of thought, which looks at the man's dark side. Are you drawn to the dark side as a writer?
No, not me personally.
No, as a writer, I presume.
As a writer, yes, certainly I'm drawn to the dark side because I think a lot of stuff happens in the dark that we need to shine a light on. Because what's already in the light is already seen. But what is in the dark needs to be seen. And that is why exploring the dark is much more interesting than being in the light.
So how does it feel to be a solitary traveler through the dark minds of people, through the dark imaginations of people? You're presuming in your imagination the imagination of others, which is what makes up the narrative. So in a way, you're actually living that, right?
But you see, yes. I mean, writing is a solitary task, as you would know very well. You're a poet, you're a writer yourself, so it's a solitary task. You lock yourself in a room, you invent a world in your head, and then you write from that perspective. But for me, because I'm writing about stuff and about people that I do not know myself, for me, the trick is the quality of empathy. That you have to just put yourself in the mind of that particular person. For the latest novel, for instance, I am imagining the world from a 25-year-old woman's perspective. And as a man, I look at the world in a very different way from a woman. When I'm traveling in a bus, I'm not mindful about my personal space. When I'm walking in a dark, deserted street at night at 11 o'clock at night, I'm not looking over my shoulder, but a woman would be. So I had to really think of the world as it would appear to a woman and put myself in the shoes of that woman and then work from that perspective.
I think so Neil empathize with that.
At the end of the day, I believe all human beings are the same. You just have to take something out of the equation or put something into the equation, because our emotions have remained the same since the time of Aristotle. Since the time, whether Shakespeare wrote about those, or you are writing about it, or I'm writing about it, our emotions have remained the same as Homo sapiens.
So I can see that now you're slowly kind of waking up. So do you, talking about myself, when I saw, read a part of Q&A and saw the movie, I'm not going to ask you which is better. I mean, that's a stupid question, the movie or the book. But it shook me up, all right? I mean, that incident of where they get into that sewer,
Yes, that is
I
not
mean,
in
it
the,
was
that
like-
is, the shit scene is not in the book.
I know. And it's the whole desperation of those people, and they completely disinterest. I mean, the cop is completely disinterested in what happens to that guy. All he wants is to do that, right? It really shakes you up. I mean, you get emotionally invested in what is going to happen to the characters, though you hopefully, how involved do you get in the life of your characters?
No, you have to get very involved because without that, you will not be able to write from the sense of authenticity. So that if, like Shankar, when Shankar dies in Q&A, when I read that, I had tears in my eyes. So I said, if I can cry, then the reader can also cry. And that is why, for me, that is very important. That I have to fully emotionally invest myself in the life I am creating, because only then will it be seen as an authentic life.
It's often said that a writer pours everything he or she has into the first book, and that's, I don't know the best book or not, but he gives it the best he's got. Has the emotional voltage you have imbued and you have felt while writing and imbued into the Q&A, has it continued in your subsequent books?
No, first of all, I want to make it absolutely clear that there is nothing of myself in my books. Yeah, I mean, in the sense, many first books are autobiographical. Arundhati Roy's book was, to a certain extent, influenced by her own personal experiences. Yes, I suppose, what you have perceived, etc., does filter into your writing. But what I am, I mean, my life does not filter into my writing. But yes, for instance, in Q&A, Shankar gets rabies and he dies. And I actually saw a young boy who used to play cricket with me actually get rabies. And when the dog had bitten him, his mother came to me and I said, please take him to the hospital. And they said, no, we have given him some ointment and he'll be fine. And within 7 days, he was dead. So that filtered into the fictional Shankar.
So what are your plans as a writer? You're still young.
What are my... Yeah, look, now I have done 4 books. So I think that, there is a body of work, so to speak. And now that I have retired from the Foreign Service, I have more spare time on my hand. But the hardest thing for a writer is to decide what to do next. Because, if you decide on a wrong project, you take a wrong turn, 6, 7 months of your life are wasted, and then you realize that, no, this does not interest me any longer. So apart from fiction, I'm also being pulled in another direction by geopolitics, which has been my vocation for 35 years. 2 publishers have approached me for a book on geopolitics, for instance. So I'm still debating whether, my next book should be a fictional book or it should be a non-fiction book on geopolitics. I think I'm waiting for, the hoopla around this particular book to subside. I think of it as a circus, and I'm a performing monkey at the moment for my publishers. But once that is over, then I'll probably take a step back and decide what to do next.
Geopolitically, let's change the topic then. I mean, geopolitically, do you see this Quad, this BRICS, actually become a serious challenger or a serious a local entity powerful enough to resist the Western lobby?
No, I think what the Russia-Ukraine war has shown us very clearly is the West still calls the shots. The West still calls the shots. Yeah. So anyone who writes the obituary of the West, I think it will be premature. The West may be in decline, but the West cannot be written off because, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Russia had already gobbled up Crimea in 2014, and President Putin just got a slap on the wrist. Nord Stream 2 continued. Germany continued to purchase oil and gas from Russia to the extent of 55%. So when he invaded Ukraine, he thought, I'll get a double slap on the wrist, that's about it. But he was saddled with the mother of all sanctions, to the extent Russia was even cut out from the SWIFT global payment system. So this tells you that, if the West really wants to tighten the screws on you, they still can, because most of the levers, of the modern day world are still controlled by them. The World Bank, the IMF, they are still controlled by the West.
So you don't think an alternate currency to the dollar is going to happen?
No, D-dollar, you see, if Trump is elected on the 5th of November, and if Trump imposes a 10% or 20% tariff on the rest of the world, then I think there will be a big move towards de-dollarization. Because then people will say, we don't want to trade with America if America doesn't want to trade with us. Let's create an alternative currency. And I think that will, I should say, speed up the moves towards de-dollarization.
But alternate currencies have always, they're nothing new. For example, if you remember, even when Rome was ruling the world at that time, there were coins which were stuck in the name of the, Greek, the Egyptian pharaoh or something. I mean, like, there's so many alternate currencies which have been in circulation. So you can't say that it's beyond a possibility, right?
No, it is not. But you see, despite all those moves, the dollar still remains the predominant currency.
Yeah.
And because the US still remains the predominant economy in the world.
So where does it leave China?
So to the extent, yes, that if the American dominance goes down, then of course the dollar's importance will also go down. So I think the two are inextricably linked.
So apart from the dependence on the dollar, you talk about the West still being powerful. I agree with you. But if you look at what's happening in Hungary or Erdogan's moves, there seems to be a move to weaken the NATO as NATO is.
Yes.
So if NATO weakens and Trump turns...
But you see, NATO had already weakened the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, President Macron called it brain dead.
True.
So what the Russian invasion of Ukraine did was, it revitalized NATO, and two historically neutral countries, Sweden and Finland, which had not joined the NATO, they decided to join NATO because they had an existence threat from an expansionist Russia.
Finland.
Yeah. Sorry, Sweden and Finland. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
So let's look at a hypothetical scenario again, geopolitically speaking. I'm sorry, we completely deviated from the literary line of thought.
Was this a buy one get one free kind of a thing?
Buy one get three free wasn't a bad idea. No, again, getting back to just a hypothetical question. Let's imagine the NATO axis is already weak. Trump takes America back to the Roosevelt isolationist kind of thing.
Yes.
Where does India figure in then vis-a-vis China then?
Look, I think India will always be an important pole of the multipolar order for the sheer reason that, we represent 1/6 of humanity, and now we have a lot of emerging strengths in a whole lot of areas. We are the pharmacy of the world. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we supplied 235 million vaccines to 98 countries. That cemented our credentials. We are at the cutting edge of IT, biotechnology, nanotechnology. So I think we are getting there, and we are already the 5th largest economy. So India cannot be ignored. But certainly, where China has reached is, a qualitatively different thing. Our economy is just about 4 trillion. Their economy is already 17 trillion. And look at their per capita. Their per capita is much higher than ours. So on the development journey, China has definitely outstripped us, but we can get there because the one thing going for us is the demographic dividend. China now has an aging population, but India, our median age is still only 29. So we will not age till about 2055. So hopefully we will grow rich before we grow old.
Yeah, if you read Friedman's 100 years, the next 100 years, I think came out maybe 100 years ago, he positions India vis-a-vis China as the ultimate end game of the 21st century. Do you really see it happening? Are we ready for it? Are we in place for it? Do we have anything?
Of China ruling the world?
No, not China ruling the world. That India and China will be the eventual,
But that's a fact, because you see, the center of economic gravity has already shifted decisively from the Atlantic to the Asia Pacific. And in the Asia Pacific, the two largest economies will be China and India. In fact, the third largest economy will be Indonesia. So that will be the order of the world in probably 2050 or 2060 or so.
Okay, now this is buy one, get three free. Going by your original predilection, I'm getting back to it. Do I see a future Le Carre kind of a thing, an international thriller,
Yes.
a geopolitical... See, I was right.
Look, I don't rule it out, because many people have asked me that as a diplomat, who has served in 4 continents, why don't you write a spy novel, starting off in Kolkata, ending in Caracas and things like that. And that does interest me, but not to the extent of, ignoring what was happening in my own country, because for me the inspiration really has come from everyday life in India. But having said that, I don't rule it out. For me, fiction writing is like the Windows advertisement. Where do you want to go today? You can go wherever you want. And if that catches my fancy, then I'll go there.
I wouldn't rule out a new Indian Le Carre, the new one and only Indian Le Carre, in the next kind of, couple of years. You seem to be eminently suited for to write an international spy thriller.
Yeah, maybe a spy thriller that starts at the Odisha Literary Festival and somebody gets murdered.
See, we already have the plot in time. So this has been a really fascinating kind of discussion. So what is your, apart from your geopolitical things, what are your personal interests which contribute to writing a book?
My personal?
What are your personal interests? Do you like to travel? Do you like to kind of,
Yes, of course. I love travel. I love especially traveling to new places. Because I always find that when I have been to a place where I have already been before, the sense of curiosity is gone. You know, you go to Paris the third time, you don't even want to see the Eiffel Tower because you've been there, done that. But you go, I went to Estonia, and I was totally fascinated by Old Town Tallinn because I had never been there. And, you know, I spent the 3 days that I was there, I was just spending it, you know, traversing those little medieval streets with cobblestones and things like that. So I love travel, of course. Travel is a great thing. And I also unwind with, you know, a good film, music, sports.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading about the tourist as an outsider concept, but the traveler is an insider. So you have been an insider in international, let's say, international existence. As a diplomat, you must have had your private moments where you could immerse yourself into the culture or
Yes,
yeah,
see,
ethos.
a good diplomat is one who immerses himself in the culture and society of that particular country. Because only then doors will open up for you which otherwise remain closed. In my first posting in Turkey, I had an assistant who said, this posting is a prison for me. I said, why? He says, I don't speak the language, I don't like their food, I don't have any friends. And he was actually marking an X on the calendar, like I was waiting for my prison sentence to end. And I thought that is such a waste of a posting because the great thing about the foreign service is it allows you to explore the very DNA of societies, you know, get a much deeper understanding of a country and a culture than you would as a tourist who visits for 7 days or 10 days. But you have to make an effort to find that essence. If you don't, then you'd also just remain a tourist.
Thank you, sir. It's a fascinating discussion. I can see the elegant
Thank
Mr. Vari, you know, being there. Thank you.